If you're watching this channel, it's because you don't enjoy watching the world squander what Christendom built, but you want to do your part. And chances are you've heard me mention a great means by doing just that. Email made by and for Catholics. Check out fidei.email. That's FIDEI.email. Built for Catholic individuals, families, organizations, and groups. They're private, secure, and of course, they're Catholic. And they're offering 2 months off on your first year for an annual subscription if you enter the coupon code Return to Tradition without spaces. That's the name of this channel, without spaces, at checkout. There is something that the Synod of Synodality did not address. Since it's basically over now, why didn't the Synod of Synodality address the quality of the men who are in the priesthood now? If you read the things that they had to say, watch the press conferences, all the reporting on it, all of it, they were very concerned about the lack of priests, the lack of permanent deacons, all of it. They were very concerned about these things. Why did they not address the quality of the men in the priesthood? If they were trying to, as many of them said, advocating for these changes to Catholicism, this rethinking of the sacraments and things, they were concerned about the legacy of Ted McCarrick, basically, and all of his spiritual children, those men morally unfit to be priests in the priesthood of Jesus Christ. They were very concerned with them, and for good reason. We should all be concerned with them. We should be concerned with Francis's weird habit of keeping bishops who hid men like that in his orbit. His own weird, disturbing, honestly, habit of reinstating priests, or attempting to, who did these things. Father Marco Rupnik comes to mind immediately. We should be concerned with that. We should be concerned that the Synod didn't bother to take that up in any meaningful way. The German bishops, in their synodal way, tried to package this concern as their motivation for giving laity control of who can be bishops, giving laity control over who could be seminarians, giving laity control of who can be ordained priests, giving laity control of parishes. They packaged that way. Their call for deaconettes and eventually priestesses, and by some of their own admissions, female bishops. They packaged all of that in light of the men like McCarrick. We should be concerned with those men because they're still there, or men with at least a James Martin inclination. And when you look at the parallel between them, it's a perfect correlation in the data on the men who did McCarrick type things and the men with James Martin inclinations. The Synod won't touch that with a 10-foot pole, because the Synod was about adopting the logic of secularism in the church to address these moral questions. Essentially a tacit admission that the secular world is right and the Catholic Church has always been wrong. It's a fundamental attack on magisterial authority, and I doubt we're done hearing about synodality anytime soon. And unfortunately, we can actually take notes from Protestants for once on this, because we have this report from the Aquila report that talks about the Presbyterian Church in America being proactive in ways the Catholic Church, for whatever reason, refuses to. So we get the headline from the Aquila report. The Constitution of the Presbyterian Church in America prohibits the ordination of men who experience unnatural inclinations. The Presbyterian Church in America recently adopted changes to its Book of Church Order that specify that an elder, quote, should conform to the biblical requirements of chastity and purity, and mostly, quote. That's logical. That's Christianity 101. I would add to that an elder, or in our case, a presbyter, a priest, should conform and submit to the church's teachings on everything, but especially on purity, on morality, and should never even give hint that he disagrees with them. The Synod could have done that. They could have also taken up the issue of expelling men from clerical orders who violate that, and would have gone much further to taking care of this McCarrick problem than they think deaconettes are going to. But unfortunately, they are so in love with deaconesses and the logic of secular philosophies underlying all of it that they think that's going to solve the church's problems, and it won't. Living according to the law of God, living a prayerful life, will go much further to solving this problem than anything these people do. I hate to give non-Catholic organizations credit where it's due, but the Presbyterians deserve credit here for this. They do. Even if I will not ever endorse their theology in any way, shape, or form. But here's what they did. In light of the secular world pressuring them, like they do the Catholic Church, to adopt secular values on all things. Quote, the Presbyterian Church in America recently adopted changes to its Book of Church Order that specify that an elder, quote, should conform to the biblical requirement of chastity and purity in his descriptions of himself and in his convictions, character, and conduct. Similarly, deacons are to be conspicuous for conforming to the biblical requirements of chastity and purity in their descriptions of themselves and in their convictions, character, and conduct. It may be fairly asked what this means, as the phrases chastity and purity occur nowhere else in their book. To understand the terms, we are therefore compelled to consider their use in the other elements of our Constitution, the Westminster Confession, and larger and shorter catechisms. In considering this, it is helpful to consider the original overture from Mississippi Valley Presbytery that urged the modification of stuff from their books. In its whereas statements, the book plainly states the preservation of chastity in body, mind, affections, words, and behavior in oneself is an indispensable duty and qualification for office. See 1 Timothy chapter 3, verse 2, and Titus chapter 1, verses 5 to 9. And that, quote, any expression of inclinations or intimacy that is not directed toward the fulfillment of a lifelong covenant of marriage, as described scripturally, is contrary to nature and to nature's God. In so doing, it cites larger catechism question, whatever, which says all unnatural inclinations are sins forbidden by the seventh commandment, as are all unclean imaginations, thoughts, purposes, and affections. The positive duty enjoined by said commandment is chastity in body, mind, affections, words, and behavior, meaning exactly what that subsection said in its whereas statement above. From this, we see that chaste and pure are matters of the heart and mind as well as the body, and that they are opposed not only to immoral deeds, but to the inclination that provokes such deeds, both in general and in the case of unclean, unnatural inclinations in particular. And mostly, quote. Why do they get this? And the Catholic leadership doesn't? Why do they get this? Now, the answer to that is, unfortunately, the Bella Dodd thesis. If you're familiar with School of Darkness, where she admitted that she, working on behalf of the hammer and sickle countries on the other side of the Great Divide in East and West in the Cold War, that she placed men morally unfit for the priesthood into the seminaries, something like 1,000 of them or something. And what kind of men would be morally unfit for the priesthood in the 1920s or 30s and 40s when she was doing this infernal work? By her own admission, there were men like James Martin. It was a two-pronged approach. It was that and men who held to the ideology of Karl Marx. That was the purpose. Why? To undermine the church's authority and to turn what authority it still had after that into the service of their cause. That was why. Now we live with the consequences and in the world made by them. There are some estimates. Up to 80% of your bishops are like James Martin. 80%. Maybe that's overblown. Maybe it's only 65. That's still about 65% too many. Okay. There should be none. Zero. They should be men of the utmost moral character. Maybe they are, or at least outwardly appearing. Maybe they go to confession with their confessors and they stay close to the sacraments to keep on the straight and narrow and to be a good shepherd. But in general, there should be no appearance whatsoever of impropriety. None whatsoever. And the Presbyterians seem to get it. But Catholic leadership won't touch that with a 10-foot pole. If you want to talk about things that will truly undermine the faith of people, it's stuff like that. That groups who are having great success bringing people out of the Catholic Church into their erroneous ways. Presbyterians are making enormous inroads in South America and in Africa right now. And the bishops do nothing about it. And why? Because their men have the outward appearance of holiness. Have you ever noticed in life when you speak with somebody and you encounter somebody, you can generally tell if they are on a higher spiritual plane than you are? I have that all the time when I speak with certain priests. All the time. They are men I would trust implicitly. That effect, when you're talking about evangelization, keeping people in the church, cannot be understated. The Presbyterians seem to get this. And while there's a general apostasy going on in the Catholic Church, we need to take stock ourselves, because the synod was embarrassing. Thankfully, for the most part, the secular world wasn't paying attention, nor were Protestant groups that much paying attention to what was going on. But it was embarrassing to watch, to watch these men not take the faith seriously, to violate Scripture overtly, to say that Scripture and magisterial authority of the church has always been wrong on these issues, instead of confronting the major issues undermining the church in our time. Let me know what you think of all this in the comments, please. Like, subscribe. If you haven't, it does help. So sharing this on social media helps too. We'll wrap this up here. So, as always, I tell you to pray for the church, because the church desperately needs your prayers in this time, as these people here are undermining the church's sacred authority. So please pray for the church, pray for Bishop Botzing, pray for all these influential figures who are undermining the church's authority on this issue. I'm Anthony Stine. Ave Maria.